So remember when I made the How to Make Games series and I made a joke about the next cave story? I was being half facetious, actually. Studio Pixel has actually made games since then. Now, not much far as I can tell, as their game history does appear to taper off after 2015, but today we're going to look at their next big release post-Cave Story. Join me for a closer look. Greetings everyone, this is the Hipster Snek, bringing a new bit of N-D-X-Cellence from Studio Pixel, the 2014 release Kero Blaster. Originally launched on Desera and later also becoming available via Steam, I've pretty much not heard anyone ever talk about this game, despite the enormity of the success of Cave Story. And seriously, the little froggy hero doesn't even get a cameo in Blade Strangers. What happened between the cave and the office building? Let's find out. To begin with, yes, of course Studio Pixel goes big on pixels, as the game maintains a similar art style to those seen in previous works. So if you're anything like me, you're immediately going to adore the presentation, and also immediately go into the options menu in order to hit the screen size x2 selection found there, because the base window is inexcusably tiny by default. But overall, it looks great. I just wish I could see more of it. The camera feels like it zoomed in really far, way closer than I feel it ought to be. But what we can see at any given time does look really nice. The enemies are all colorful and they pop out, except the ones that are supposed to blend in, those crafty devils. And there's these weird black fuzzy things that appear with big cartoon eyes that line the landscape. The game gives them the faux scientific name N-D-X-Cellence, like these things from Celeste, but more aggressive. More on them later. And the game sounds amazing. Pixel has always had incredible music in this jaunty 8-bit style, somewhere between Super Mario Bros. And Mega Man in theme. It's very peppy when it wants to be, and very down and solemn when it needs to be. If you enjoy chiptune tracks with earworms galore, look no further. The first level song was actually so earwormy, I had to double check the Cave Story OST just to make sure that I didn't already know the song, given how fast it implanted itself in my brain. And the pleasant store and menu themes will haunt me even 100 years from today with how simple, fun, and catchy they are. If the game dev ever weaponized this technology, I feel the world would be in a lot of trouble. Anyway, Kero Blaster has you take the role of a frog with a gun. The title didn't tip you off. Kero being the Japanese onomatopoeia for a frog's croak. Fun fact actually, during an interview, Pixel mentioned offhandedly that it was almost going to be named Gero Blaster with a hard G sound. But that word could also be indicative of someone throwing up. Strange but true facts. Anyhow, the frog never gets a name in this game and thus shall be referred to as the Frog for the remainder of this review. The frog is teamed up with a pink ball thing. Another fun fact, this character was actually the star of 2 different spin-off titles, one being a sort of demo for Kero Blaster, Pink Hour and Pink Heaven. And also there's this cat in a lab coat who I shall call Dr. Cat, I guess? Not to be confused with their boss, the purple cat lady who I shall call Boss Cat. Because I am the best at naming things, of course. Moving along, the frog, the pink ball, and Dr. Cat explain in brief that the frog operates as a sort of specialized custodian, using a blaster gun that never needs to be reloaded, and the removal of harmful elements from different locations. Chief among these being the N-D-X-Cellence. And let me step aside for a moment and talk about these because the game barely even touches on them, but I find the idea behind them fascinating. The N-D-X-Cellence are these black fuzzy things with eyes, many of which are white-eyed versions, who sit around and don't attempt to harm the player in any capacity. Some of which are the hyper-aggressive red-eyed variants, who charge the frog without any provocation required. Dr. Cat explains them at one point in the main story that these are fragments of experiences people have had that they can't let go of, which are now manifesting courtesy of some type of server structure that's a little unclear. I find this idea amazing, and the game really doesn't make a big deal out of them, other than the fact that if left to their own devices, these can actually become a much bigger problem. Because certain characters don't actually speak, this isn't even really explored in depth, but I just love the notion that these little simple things represent. Anyway, it's another shift at Cat and Frog Incorporated, and the frog heads out into the field. If you played Cave Story, this should feel somewhat familiar, with a few elements unique to Kero Blaster. To begin with, the game is set up in linear level progression format. There's no central hub in terms of gameplay for you to return to, with warp shortcuts to a handy shop found throughout the levels. Enemies can randomly drop money, with later game enemies being more prone to dropping larger denominations, and the shops can upgrade any of the 4 weapons the frog can collect: the pea shooter, the wave, the bubbler, and the flamethrower, up a number of steps to enhance their usefulness and damage output. Handy dandy tip: prioritize the wave first, the flamethrower second, the pea shooter third. Upgrade the bubbler only if you're so inclined, as it is overall the least useful weapon in the game, and you'll only use it maybe 2 or 3 times at any real length. The wave is overall the most useful weapon in the game, due to its wide shot and the relative short distances between screen transitions, and its final form, the Ninja Star, has a scatter and bounce mechanic that makes it extremely useful in almost every situation. The flamethrower can travel up hills as you're moving, making it good for run-and-gun areas or ice-themed enemies. The pea shooter, in its final form, Laser Uzi, is the best boss-busting weapon in the game, and even its own in-game description will say as much. You can also upgrade health, get a heart jar which restores your health to 4 when you die, and get extra lives. Wait, lives, I hear you ask? Yes, the game uses a life system, but worry not, it's quite fair. So long as you have spare lives, your little frog will revive at the start of the current area you're in whenever he dies. And if you do run out of lives, your frog takes a brief stint in the hospital until you decide to continue, and you begin the current stage from the starting point instead. This makes the game feel fair and still brisk-paced without offering some kind of bite to an untimely death, as oftentimes being sent back to the start can be a chance to return to the shop and pick up some much-needed powering up. But it also leads into what I don't necessarily like about the game. For starters, the game is grindy. While early game bosses can be beaten with minimal powering up courtesy of skill, later bosses demand the player and their froggy comrade be able to take and dish out beatings in kind. Bosses will simply have too much health and spam too many bullets at the player for them to realistically cope without repeated trips to the shop, and yes, grinding for money in order to get said power-ups as a result. Prices escalate quickly, and it can really feel like forced grinding to produce artificial playtime length. Realistically speaking, Kero Blaster's main story mode should be beaten front to back in somewhere between an hour and a half to 2 hours. But with the forced grinding, it will soon come to look more like 3 or 4 hours. And that's the thing, this game is really quite light on content. The 2015 patch helped with this quite a bit as it added Zangyo, or overtime mode, where you start a new hard mode run with revised level designs, more aggressive boss battles, and all prices are raised by 50%. But the same problems simply arise again, and in some ways even more so now. A lot of the time, it doesn't feel like I'm even the one beating the bosses and winning the game. It oftentimes feels like the shop is beating the bosses and winning the game. And that's kind of disappointing feeling in a game that really should be shorter than it rightfully is. Oh yeah, another fun cultural note here, courtesy of the Steam trading cards. Service Zangyo refers to the Japanese practice of doing overtime work for free. For my foreign viewers who may have questions about this practice is illegal in the United States in most cases. And this leads me to a thought about this game. It sort of feels like this might be a commentary on Japanese office life. Sort of a video game version of Dilbert, if that makes any sense. The frog isn't trying to be any sort of hero or champion of justice, he's just trying to clean up a messy worksite and get about his workday so he can clock out on time. But yet, in so doing, he's a hero of sorts, and ends up getting in over his froggy head because he wants to do a good job. It's kind of a celebration of the hard work that is the day job, and there's something to be said for that. Overall, Kero Blaster can't help but be compared to Cave Story, because that's the pedigree from whence it came, and that comparison will always be a bit unfair. Kero Blaster was designed from its inception to be a light, breezy platformer shooter experience with some challenging boss fare and interesting twists with a little story to be the connective tissue between it all. Does it all come together? I'd say yes, it absolutely does. It is a really good game, and even at its worst, which would be the grinding, it's not even that bad at all, as the grinding is still fairly quick if you do it at the best possible spot, which is the last few screens before arriving at the Cat and Frog Industry building. The characters are colorful and fun, and I'm having fun gradually chiseling my way through Zangyo mode too. Anyone who enjoys games like Mega Man or Metroid are in for a treat in this underrated bit of N-D-X-Cellence. This has been the Snek Blaster, and if you liked today's video, hit the like button so I know so. Leave a comment down below on what you thought of it. Would you even have known this was done by the Cave Story guy if I hadn't mentioned that? For more content from me, you can either hit the subscribe and bell icons to help the channel grow, or even pop over to the Tomodachi Bros podcast, where my closest coworkers and I talk anime, movies, and more. Hit us up sometime in our enormous quantity of social media, all links in the description of every video every time. And join me here every week for more obscure reviews, N-D-X-Cellence, and more. You never know what'll crop up next, but rest assured I will see you there.